Now that we're planning on building a key actor blueprint to use in our level, we're going to take a look at the basic logic that would be used by the key actor, because we'll find that that logic can be used in a lot of other different cases throughout the level for different purposes. So the basic logic of the key actor works this way. Player walks through the level, they find actor A. Actor A is inaccessible to them. They can't interact with it. They can't get it to do anything, nothing like that. Then as they wander through the level further, they find actor B, which allows them access to actor A. So by picking up actor B through interacting with it, representationally, they pick it up. It's added to a conceptual inventory. We don't have an inventory system in our game, so we need to do something that shows that they removed it from the world and it's on their person, conceptually speaking. Then once they have this on their person and they return to actor A, they can access actor A. So a use case for this would work like this. For example, this is some of the gameplay that we planned out in the LDD. So the foreman's office door is locked. There are some keys that are found later in the level that allows the player to open the foreman's office door. So the player interacts with the foreman's keys, picking them up, adding them to a conceptual inventory. Then the player can open the foreman's office door. Another case from the LDD includes the entrance to the foreman's house. The entrance to the foreman's house is blocked by a barricade. As the player walks through the world, they eventually find a crowbar that allows them to remove the barricade. They then pick up the crowbar, adding it to their inventory, and then when they return to the barricade, the player can remove the barricade blocking the foreman's house. Finally, we have the idea of the mill. The mill is not producing power. Replacing a gear wheel allows the mill to generate power. When the player finds the gear wheel, they pick it up, it's added to their inventory, so to speak. And then when they return to the machine in the mill, the player can restore power at the mill. So that's the basic way these things can work and how we can use this parent actor to serve all these needs in our gameplay. So now that we know the requirements for our key parent actor, we can start building it. So let's right-click in the Blueprints folder here in the content browser, create a blueprint class, just a basic actor to be placed in the world. We'll call this BP underscore key parent. We'll open this up. So we know we want this actor to use the interact interface that was created by Tim Van Ken for his course. So we're going to first add that in, go to class settings, and we'll add an interface here. We'll add BPI interaction so that we can use that. Okay, and let's go to we don't need these, I don't think, so we'll delete them. So we'll go to the event graph now, and we will add this event, implement event. This will basically, when the player interacts with this event will be called, and it will simulate what we talked about earlier of picking up the item. So we want to visually represent what that looks like for the sake of our proto level. We want to make sure that looks good. So now that that's in place as a placeholder, let's do a few things. One, we only want this to happen once. So we'll type a do once here. Make sure this only happens once. And we want also to, in case we need it, we're going to make a variable called isTaken to determine if the players pick this thing up or not. So there's that. We'll drag it in here. We'll set it to be positive, true, player does have it. And from there, we want a few things to happen once the player interacts with it. One, we want to, like I said, we want to represent with the thing basically being taken. So that means we need a visual representation for anything that's a key. So what we'll do is we'll make a static mesh component here. By default, we'll make it the key proxy mesh that I have here under static meshes. So we'll select that. And I typically like to get rid of this default white ball right here. I don't really like to see that. It tends to obscure what I'm trying to do. So I'm just going to add a new scene root here. I'll call it root, and I'll drag it up to replace that, just so I don't have to look at that white billboard. Okay, so there's our keys. Next, we want to add two things. We want this to work kind of like our door. So we want an interaction radius in the middle here. So let's add a couple spheres. One of them will be for interaction. We'll call this interaction collision. We'll leave this at small 32. That seems fine. We'll set the collision settings to interaction as before. And then we want the same thing. We want a little feedback when the player gets within a certain radius here. So I'm going to duplicate this collision, call it interaction radius. So when the player enters this radius, they get a text UI indication that they can pick up whatever this is with a name too, so they're not confused. And we're going to just make this thing a lot bigger, I think. Let's make it 128 radius. And we want it to be collision just overlapping the pawn only. So we have those two things. And then lastly, we want our text render component. And again, these are the core components that we'll be using for anything that sort of resembles the functionality of a key. So that's text render, and we'll just call it, I'll leave it as text for now. Maybe I'll center it just so it's a little cleaner. I'll place it above the thing. Okay, so now let's work a little bit on the logic of what happens with these components. So when the player interacts with this, we want to simulate picking it up. In other words, the item vanishes from the world, presumably gets put in a backpack or a pocket or something. So once that's true, we're going to hide the visuals here, which include the static mesh and the text render. I'm just going to set these hidden in game. And then just to be on the safe side, we'll get a reference to self here, and we'll just turn off all the collision on everything, so it doesn't interfere with the player's movement. So it'll appear like it's gone from the world. So we're going to go to set actor enable collision, and we're going to turn that off. Next, we want to add sort of a placeholder event for any child class that happens to be doing something when this item is quote unquote taken or picked up. So we'll add a custom event here. We'll call it start events on taken. And we'll call this event right here at the end of the interact chain, start events on taken. And now we want to work a little bit on the so-called UI, placeholder UI. So for that, we're going to look at the interaction radius. We're going to add overlap events like we did last time on the door. We'll do on begin, and we'll do on end. Okay, so what we'll do is we only want this to happen if this item is considered taken. So we're going to do a Boolean check here with a branch. We'll do one for each event. I'm just going to copy paste that. And then if is taken is false, we want to hide the text render or show the text render depending. Set hidden in game. So if it's false, the player overlaps. We don't want it hidden. We want it to be shown. And then when they stop overlapping, we want it to go away. So that pretty much covers the interaction experience. Now let's actually look at how this thing can affect a change in the so-called item B, actor B that we discussed earlier. So what we're going to do now is we're going to add a variable. And we're going to just make this just an actor class. And this actor class can be many things, including a door. And we're going to name this actors to unlock. And if you're wondering how we can unlock an actor, we're going to make greater use of the BP interface from before. So let's make this an array. So maybe like one key can open a lot of doors. And we'll make this an exposed variable. And it doesn't hurt at this point when you start building sort of LD tools like this in Blueprint to start to categorize your variables and things. So let's call this BP key, just so it's easier to find in details whenever you're searching for it. Okay, so actors to unlock. So what does this mean? It means that when the player interacts with this key thing, when they get to this part of the chain of events, they need to do a check. So we take actors to unlock. Let's disconnect this here for now. Actors to unlock, and then they loop through this array. And they look to see if it has the BPI interface. This is kind of how this was handled before in the player character in Tim's earlier course. And we'll look for BP interaction. There it is. And we'll do a branch check there. And then we need to add a new function to the interface. We're going to call it unlock, but it doesn't exist right now. We're going to need it. So let's do that. Let's go to the BPI interaction. I'm just going to click this to browse to it. We're going to open it up. We're going to add a new function here. We're just going to call it simply unlock. We'll compile and save that. Now when we go back to our parent, we can call that function, that message, unlock. And then let's reconnect start events on taken to completion of unlocking all the linked actors. So I'll just reconnect this. So to reiterate here, on actors to unlock, I've made this a public editable variable because on every instance of the key we place in the world, we want to be able to pick actors in the world to unlock. So now that we've created our key parent actor, most of its core functionality is there. We can easily create a child class of this to represent anything that has the same basic functionality, but maybe just has a different visual appearance. So what that means is, if this is really the core functional part of a key, means we don't really need a static mesh here. So we can keep the static mesh blank in the parent class. So it becomes neutral, universal. But if we right click here and we create our child blueprint class for a key that's literally a key, like a mechanical key, we can do a couple things. We'll open up our BP key. And actually, in keeping with the naming convention that Tim Van Can established, we'll call this BPC for child class key. And if we open it up, we can set the static mesh here because this is our true representation of a key. So we'll use the static mesh keyring proxy. And then let's go to the event graph. And we can call the event that we included here in the parent class placeholder event, start events on taken. We can override it here. So this gets called here in the parent class. Then whatever we want to happen, once the keys are actually sort of quote unquote picked up by the player, this event can fire based on that. So with that in place, we're ready to start working on adapting our doors to be unlocked by keys.